Working Group on Youth, Peace and Security. The Civil Society Working Group on Youth, Peace and Security
was born out of desire by civil society and youth-led organizations
to advocate youth-led implementation of the Youth, Peace and Security agenda
within the Security Council and with the UN member states,
and ensure that civil society and youth perspectives are included in the Security Council decision-making processes.
We are calling on young leaders, local, regional, and global youth-led and youth-serving organizations from across the world
to sign up as members of the Civil Society-only Working Group on Youth, Peace and Security.
Contribute to the coordination of effective implementation of youth, peace, and security operations.
With your participation, we can ensure that the Security Council
is more considerate of young peace builders, leading critical efforts to build sustainable peace.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're based. My name is Malika Iyer. I am the Asia Programs Coordinator at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, and today I am your moderator. Thank you so much for joining us at the launch of the Civil Society Working Group on Youth, Peace, and Security. Before we get started, just a couple of house rules. If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone so that we don't have any background noise. And we want this to be an interactive dialogue, and we're definitely going to have space for you to make interventions. So please use the chat and feel free to raise your hand when we open the floor up for dialogue. So without further ado, I'd like to explain to you what our specific objectives are for today. The first one is to launch the Civil Society Working Group on Youth, Peace and Security and create a platform for sustained communication and coordination with key stakeholders. The second is to present recommendations for youth-led effective implementation of the Youth, Peace and Security resolutions based on the research conducted by student researchers as a part of the New York University Center for Global Affairs, GNWP, which is a global network of women peace builders practicum, and to encourage greater investment in and recognition of young people's critical contributions to peace building and humanitarian action. Since its adoption in December 2015, United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250 on Youth, Peace, and Security has been hailed as the first of its kind to recognize young people as meaningful drivers of change through its explicit encouragement of youth leadership at all levels of conflict prevention and peace building. The Youth, Peace, and Security agenda has been further strengthened by two additional resolutions adopted in 2019 and 2020. Despite this important normative framework, the United Nations Security Council and other global policy-making spaces remain largely inaccessible for young people leading peace building and humanitarian action in conflict and crisis-affected communities. Language barriers, insecurity, unreliable internet access, and limited awareness of existing opportunities, amongst other factors, inhibit countless young peace builders from being able to share their perspectives, recommendations, experiences, and challenges with key stakeholders in the global policymaking community. Effective implementation of the Youth, Peace, and Security agenda requires greater investment in, recognition of, and support for diverse young people's meaningful participation and leadership in decision-making on peace, security, and humanitarian action at all levels. This includes the deliberations at the Security Council, where policymakers can set global precedents for meaningful engagement at national and local levels. The Civil Society Working Group on Youth, Peace, and Security was born out of a desire by civil society and youth-led organizations to conduct collective advocacy and seize on strategic opportunities to advance the Youth, Peace, and Security agenda. And it's currently being chaired by us at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders and the United Network of Young Peace Builders. So I have the honor of inviting to speak Ms. Alicia Gilenkov, who is the co-director co-director at the United Network of Young Peace Builders, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the objectives of the working group, as well as its membership. Alicia, over to you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for being here today for this joyous occasion that is the launch of the Civil Society Working Group on Youth, Peace and Security. So just like Malika said, the working group was really born out of this desire by civil society and youth-led organization to conduct independent and collective advocacy and see a strategic opportunity to advance the YPS agenda. But there was also frustration on our end when it comes to really being able to provide the opportunities that young peace builders who are working in the context that we are invited often to talk about, to actually provide them with the platform and the opportunities to voice their frustrations and their recommendations directly to the Security Council. This has also been shared by some of the discussions that we've had with member states representatives who also hope that there is a more direct communication platform for those exchanges and those recommendations to take place, as we know that many of us are struggling with time, and we're hoping that the platform can really be that space for everyone. So the Civil Society Working Group brings together 147 civil society and youth-led organizations and networks from 74 countries. As Malika mentioned, the working group is co-chaired by GNWP, the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, which is a coalition of over 100 women's rights organizations from over 40 countries around the world experiencing humanitarian crises or conflict, and the United Network of Young Peace Builders, a network of over 120 youth-led organizations in 70 countries working to build a world free of violence. The working group also has a steering committee, given the large membership, that is made up of 9 youth and non-youth organizations. We're hoping, and the main aim of the working group is to ensure that civil society and youth perspectives are meaningfully and intentionally integrated into Security Council decision-making processes on peace and security. The main objectives of the working group are in effect to lead advocacy for effective youth-led implementation of the 3 and hopefully more to come resolutions, to build support and ownership for the YPS agenda among Security Council members as well as other UN member states, especially the champions on youth, peace and security. We're also hoping to create a platform for sustained communication, coordination, and partnerships between Security Council member states, the champions of youth, global policymakers, and civil society, local and international youth-led networks working on the youth, peace, and security agenda. And of course, to improve coordination and collaboration between civil society and youth-led networks that advocate for effective implementation of YPS resolutions in order to strengthen the impact of advocacy within the UN Security Council member states. And our, I would say, raison d'être is to support the inclusion and participation of young people as civil society briefers in Security Council meetings, and to have that be as meaningful as possible, and for young people to actually gain more out of these experiences than participation itself. I will also like to mention some of the examples of initiatives that we're hoping to undertake in the year or in years to come. So we're definitely working to develop joint strategies to advance the youth, peace and security agenda, provide briefings for relevant actors to facilitate the participation and leadership of youth-led networks and young peace builders, to monitor the implementation of YPS resolutions by the UN Security Council, develop YPS recommendations tailored to each theme and country issue on the agenda of the Security Council, and many more. So as you can see, we have a lot of ambitions, a lot of passion, and a lot of energy that is coming from the 154 members of the Civil Society Working Group. And again, you're very welcome to join today's event, and we hope to have a great discussion afterwards. And I'll hand it back to you, Malika.
Thank you so much, Alicia. So we couldn't think of a better occasion than on the sidelines of the 6th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 2250 to launch the Civil Society Working Group on Youth, Peace, and Security to accelerate and strengthen accountability for effective youth-led implementation of the Youth, Peace, and Security agenda. And now we're going to go into a panel discussion where we'll hear from members of our working group on their priorities for the implementation of the Youth, Peace, and Security agenda from each of the regions that they represent. And they are going to be responding to 3 questions. The first is, what progress has been made by youth-led civil society organizations and networks in the implementation of the Youth, Peace, and Security agenda? The second is on the challenges facing the meaningful participation of and leadership of young people in peace processes. And the third is what their priorities are in their region for engagement with the United Nations Security Council on the implementation of the Youth, Peace, and Security agenda. So the first person I'm going to hand the floor over to is Victor Okechukwu Chimizi, the Executive Director of Mind Reformers Network from Nigeria. Victor, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Can we hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes, so I'm Victor Okechukwu Chimizi from Nigeria, and I'm the Executive Director, or what we call here as founder and team lead of the team, which is a youth-based initiative working on getting young minds intentionally interested in and committed to peace-building processes across the country. I'm also the country coordinator, volunteers country coordinator for SAIPAN, which is Commonwealth Youth Peace Ambassador Network in Nigeria, where I lead 300 active peace builders in pushing for a peaceful, tolerant, and non-extremist community. Yeah, so basically, I'm here to join us as we celebrate the launch of the Civil Society Working Group on Youth, Peace, and Security, which I find very exciting for me, who have devoted all my time for years now in advocating for youth in peace-building processes. And over time, all my work over the years has been targeted directly at young persons under the age of 30. Basically, the thousands of persons I've reached via my peace-building across cities in Nigeria are all under the age of 30, teenagers and those in their 20s. So it's really an exciting thing for me to be here today to talk to you about the work in Africa and how far we've gone as regards the Youth, Peace, and Security agenda, and specifically as regards the UNSCR 2250. Basically, I'll be talking on 3 basic areas, which is firstly, the progress that has been made as regards the implementation of the Youth, Peace, and Security agenda. Here we are looking at the progress that have been made with the center focus on Nigeria and Africa, specifically beaming the searchlight on West Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, as you may call it. I also go into the challenges we face as youth and as young peace builders from my experience and from interactions with other leading peace builders in the region. I'll be sharing with us the challenges, and then I'll be talking about the priorities as regards the UNSCR 2250. What are the priorities that we are focusing on at the moment? For this, I'll be particularly talking about Nigeria, of which I have vast experience in, of which has really been my focus. Yes, so basically, I'll be starting with the progress. We've done some progress, really. That is what we should give kudos to young persons in the region, particularly Nigeria, which I'm from. We've published a national action plan, which was work done by energetic young peace builders in partnership with the government. The document has been put together, published, and officially launched. So in Nigeria, one of the progress particularly that we've done is the launching of the National Action Plan on Youth, Peace, and Security, which is to guide our action over the years. And this is to give credit to all the young peace builders who have been on the neck of the government, drawing their attention politely to this and seeing to its success. So for Nigeria, we've launched a national action plan. And then the next part of it is to see that we encourage the government to keep to the plan. Early today, we had our 60th anniversary celebration of the UNSCR 2250 just some hours ago, where we also looked at how we can encourage the government to go into making sure that we follow the National Action Plan religiously and as much as we can and intentionally. So that's one of the progress. We also have some countries who are also doing a lot of progress in launching and in finishing up the National Action Plan. Gambia is on its way too. They are in an advanced stage as regards their document on the National Action Plan on Youth, Peace and Security. We also have Liberia. Liberia is doing a lot of work too. They're also at an advanced stage in getting together their work on youth, the National Action Plan on Youth, Peace and Security. We also have some countries, not really at advanced stage, but they are working on it already. There are countries like Guinea. Guinea are working on their National Action Plan too. And we have Ghana. And you see, this goes to say a lot of, to say that young persons across Africa are giving a lot of commitment to building peace. It goes to show the energy they are putting into this work to encourage the government, push the government to say, hey, we are ready to work with you. We are ready to help you put things through. Most of all this is not being led by the governments, is it in Nigeria or in Gambia? It's being led by young people, you know, partnering with the government and saying, hey, we want to help you make sure we take the center stage and get peace and security in Africa. And I think it's kudos to young peace builders all over the region. Yeah, and that's for the National Action Plan. Another progress we've made as regards the youth, peace and security work is we are seeing lots of collaborative efforts amongst young peace builders now. We are seeing organizations coming together to support young peace builders. One of them is the Peace First, which encourages young people in their work and supports them with mini grants in their work. Another organization, which I'm sure they are in this call, is Untitled Peace Builders. Untitled Peace Builders is doing a lot of work in Africa in recognizing local and grassroots peace builders and helping them with capacity building, helping them. And you see, there's a lot of work now, collaborative efforts between this organization, like a peer-to-peer thing to support each other, right? And I think it's kudos to this organization and to the local peace builders who are now coming together to join strength, partner together to see that we hold ourselves together and our strength and our skills to see that peace is achieved from Nigeria to Gambia to Ghana. We see a lot of strength, collaborative strength. And other countries, Cameroon, we see the work of the Commonwealth Peace Ambassador Network, which I lead in Nigeria, coming together, mobilizing youth organizations across the various countries in the continent to see that we collaborate and harness our strength together and human resources to see that we build peace across the continent. And I think that's also another way we should give kudos to young peace builders. If you notice, I'm not saying giving kudos to the country, I'm saying kudos to the young peace builders because this is the work of the young peace builders. Yeah. So this is as far as the progress we have done in Nigeria and Africa. We also have some challenges, you know. Of course, where you have progress, there's going to be challenges. And one of the major challenges personally that I've experienced is we noticed that the government don't really still believe in young people. There is no intentionality in including the young persons in decision-making and peace building. So you have young persons having to push and push and push before you get the support of the government. Sometimes there have to be lots and lots of pushing. For example, the National Action Plan for Nigeria, there have to be lots of pushing and pushing and pushing towards the government before they finally succumb and say, okay, you are energetic, come do this and the rest. So I think that's the problem we are having in Nigeria and Africa. We also have structural inequalities which is a problem across all African countries, is really slowing down the work of young peace leaders across the continent. We also have poverty and unemployment, across various parts of Nigeria. We are telling people to go build peace. They don't do that on an empty stomach. They don't do that jobless, And unfortunately, those that are in the business of war and terrorism, they are financed heavily, and sometimes they come get young peace builders with the aim of paying them. Sadly, sometimes they do, and some young people see this as a job and they take on destroying their fellow humans and their future. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge. We are facing poverty and unemployment. Currently, Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world due to poor leadership and poor management of resources. That's having about 56 natural resources. A lot of over 100 million Nigerians still live below $1 per day, below $1. And that is a very big problem we are facing. Yeah, I've spoken on lack of intentional inclusion of young peace builders. I'll just share a story. There was supposed to be a dialogue between young peace builders across the country. I'm speaking for Nigeria now. After preparation gathering of amazing young peace builders for the conference, we suddenly discovered that the young person all removed and replaced with older politicians. And they just had their discussions and came up with a resolution that they wanted to come up with, which is like a disconnect from what is really happening, and is a problem we face. One other problem which we also have is shrinking civic spaces. Civic spaces is really shrinking in Nigeria and other parts of Africa. We are having democracy is falling across Nigeria and Africa. If you've been following our story here in Nigeria, Twitter was banned for years because young persons now use this as a way to amplify their voices and unite to call on the government to do what is right. And for some years now, young persons have been struggling to access Twitter, which have been a major point of amplifying our voices to call for good governance. And it's really a challenge. We also see we are having challenge of inhuman treatment of young people who stand up for their rights and stand up for fellow young people. It's happening in Nigeria, happening in other parts of Africa. And this is really sad and hampering on our work. One other thing is for grassroots young peace builders, though we have a few organizations like United Peace Builders and Peace First who are doing a lot of work to support young people, we also find out that a lot of grassroots-led effective young peace builders across the continent are still suffering. And when international donors come, what they do is they rather hold big conferences in hotels and they term it peace building workshop and all that. But sadly, the major work is at the grassroots. And when they call persons to come to the big international hotel, those persons are mostly usually disconnected with the grassroots. And then the thousands of dollars go to waste, and instead of going to the grassroots, locating and assessing the grassroots-led peace builders who understand the language of conflict. The local grassroots peace builders understand the language of the conflict in these areas, and they will easily help to solve the problem with support and capacity building of international organizations, and we'll get the work done in peace and security. But most times what we see is international peace builders just connect with national peace building organizations who have little connection to the grassroots. And then instead of solving the problem remains unsolved. So it's a challenge we face, and I hope international organizations who are interested in supporting peace work in Africa take note of this and begin to source out to allocate global grassroots-led peace builders and peace organizations. Okay, so I have just 1 minute left. I'm sorry, I have so much to say. I'll just go to priorities, right? So our priorities now for Nigeria particularly is to push for protection and partnership with the government, partnership of international organizations with effective youth peace building organizations and grassroots-led peace building organizations. We are having a lot of issues with protection nowadays. The NSAS protest was one to call for good governance, to call for protection of young people. But I tell you, lots of persons have died due to that protest. Until now, there's no justice. Young persons are now going undercover to speak the truth. And it's very sad for a country with huge population of young persons like Nigeria, a continent with huge population of young persons like Africa. We are having lack of protection of young persons, which is basically a challenge. We also have partnership. We are taking this as another priority. We need more power. We are looking at how we can get more partnership, intentional partnership, not political one with government where they want to harness young persons for their own political gains. Also, we need intentional partnership to solve the problem of insecurity in Nigeria and Africa. And also, we are looking at how we can intentionally now begin to prevent insecurity. One thing we must recognize is that insecurity in Nigeria and in some other part of Africa is becoming business, because sadly, some persons are now benefiting. It's now becoming a business for some persons, and it's a big challenge. And we are still looking at how we can solve that challenge and prevent violence and terrorism because of the millions of persons being affected, and billions rather, across the continent. This is basically what we are doing in Nigeria and Africa. And we hope to see other countries across the world also working on their national action plan and publishing it. We hope to see more collaborations with grassroots-led peace-building organizations and international groups. And we hope to see a lot of work being done by the civil society working groups to hold capacity building training for young peace builders, and to connect every one of us together so that we can see young peace builders taking the center stage in pushing for peace and security. Because young people, we are the future. We are not just the future, we are the present. And it's time we take the center stage and push for a greater Africa and a greater world. It's time to push for a world with peace and security for all. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Victor. That was a very powerful ending, and you couldn't be more right. We are the present, and we are also the future. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Lara Zuzanne Goles-Corhi from the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice.
Thank you very much for having me and for providing a platform to share our work, Youth, Peace, and Security YPS at Intersections, Bridging YPS, Gender Justice, and Migrant Rights. I am Dr. Lara Zuzanne Goles-Corhi. I'm an assistant professor for political science and global affairs, and also the co-director of the Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies program at the University of Portland. I'm also the founder, executive director, and advocacy director at the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice, or CMGJ, and that's why I'm here today. CMGJ is a nonprofit NGO that addresses human rights at the intersection of migration and gender. We are women-led, we are migrant-led, we are youth-led, and youth-inspired, as you will see throughout my presentation. At CMGJ, we believe that without peace and security, there will be migration and displacement. And without youth involvement in solutions and matters of peace and security, protection gaps will remain. And it is exactly this premise that has informed our work on youth, peace, and security at Intersections. So for today's presentation, I would like to focus on bridging youth, peace, and security with gender justice and migrant rights by sharing one of our ongoing projects that speaks to these connections, namely our work on the Venezuelan humanitarian crises. This project demonstrates innovative approaches by youth in addressing the crisis while also highlighting challenges in the meaningful participation and leadership in peace processes. So to begin with, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the team behind our latest contribution to this project, namely CMGJ's youth advocates, Carolina Cortez, Ana Garcia, and Emma Wells. Our contribution, Women, Peace, and Security in the Venezuelan Situation, Centering Civil Society Efforts and Envisioning the Role of the UN, emerged in the context of a call for essays by the United Nations University of Peace and the Center for Justice and Peace, CEPAS, in Venezuela. And it was without a doubt that I envisioned that this contribution needs to include youth advocates, especially from the region. So our contribution was selected as a winner of the competition and was recently recently published. So how did we approach this contribution as a reflection of youth engagement? What challenges did we encounter and what did we find, especially in terms of the involvement of the UN Security Council? Since the contribution focused on women, girl, LGBTQIA+, and gender diverse Venezuelan migrants, we began with an analysis of the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda that was established in 2000 as UN Security Council Resolution 1325, and that entails 4 central engagement pillars: participation, prevention, protection, as well as relief and recovery. And so in addressing all 4 of these central engagement pillars, we propose that in envisioning the role of the United Nations, specifically the UN Security Council, in the Venezuelan situations, gendered and youth approaches towards advocacy and international decision-making are imperative. And we found that decision-making processes must involve gender and youth bodies at the UN and in civil society. And so in this context, the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda provides an important framework in identifying alternative solutions through bottom-up civil society-led efforts through the various mechanisms and stakeholders, including youth engagement, that are involved here. So what are these mechanisms and who are the stakeholders that can facilitate alternative solutions to the Venezuelan situation? While Women, Peace, and Security has become one of the main thematic pillars of the UN Security Council's work, the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda generally follows a multi-stakeholder approach, which includes other intergovernmental organizations, civil society organizations, as well as expert groups. And civil society organizations, of course, including youth-led and youth servicing and youth providing organizations, as was the focus of our contribution, for instance, can track key developments on women, peace, and security, and the council provide advocacy messages tailored to the specific what's going on in the council and to monitor its debates and its outcomes. But again, what's missing of this kind of official broader listing is youth engagement, which really reflects one of the critical challenges in the meaningful participation and leadership of young people in peace processes, not only in Venezuela, but elsewhere as well. Nevertheless, we envisioned several ways that youth can contribute within this existing multi-stakeholder structure, and we made recommendations accordingly. Indeed, this multi-stakeholder approach led us to suggest that the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda, and with it, the informal experts group on women, peace, and security, the NGO working group on women, peace, and security, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, as well as the newly formed Women, Peace, and Security and Humanitarian Action Compact, present platforms through which the Venezuelan situation can be addressed in meaningful ways, including by youth. And so here's what we recommended based on an analysis of the functioning of the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda, its challenges and opportunities for the Venezuelan situation, and also in identifying the specific needs and challenges of women, girl, LGBTQIA+, and gender diverse Venezuelan migrants. And there's much to be said about these recommendations. I would like to focus on ways within which youth can be engaged, notably with regards to the establishment of national action plans, as also was just touched upon, but within the context of Women, Peace, and Security, as well as the Women, Peace, and Security Humanitarian Action Compact. So in the context of Women, Peace, and Security, national action plans are national level strategy documents that outline a course of action on the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda. And these documents outline objectives and activities that countries can take to secure human rights of women and girls in conflict settings, to prevent armed conflict and violence, and to ensure the meaningful participation of women in peace and security. And often so, these action plans are aligned with regional and national development agendas, gender equality policies, and other relevant areas within domestic and foreign policy, including policies, of course, also on youth. And since they're regularly monitored and reviewed at the international level, specifically by the UN, we found this to be an important space for youth engagement. The establishment of national action plans not only shows a commitment by countries to implement the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda, but also provides monitoring, reporting, and accountability mechanisms. So we found that given this alignment with other relevant areas and the accountability mechanisms established, there is space for meaningful engagement of youth, as previously mentioned again by Victor in the case of Nigeria, for instance, but here, of course, operating with a Women, Peace and Security agenda. And then with regards to youth engagement and the Women, Peace and Security Humanitarian Action Compact, it is important to note that the compact is convened under UN Women with the support of the whole UN system, and it serves as a secretariat to guide and to co-design the monitoring and oversight of actions at the intersection of women, peace and security and humanitarianism. And again, this is really where our work at the intersections comes in. The compact is led by a board and receives ongoing support and guidance from a group of catalytic members. Board and catalytic members represent member states, regional organizations, the UN system, civil society, academia, and the private sector. And so we find that this new compact provides for an important space for youth to regularly discuss the Venezuelan situation within the broader UN system. As signatories of the compact, for instance, youth-led or youth-serving civil society organizations in Venezuela and abroad, working at the humanitarian migration nexus, can form collective action and mobilization while also operating in and directly engaging with the UN in important ways. And just allow me to conclude here and with saying again, thank you for having me and for allowing me to and giving the space to present this work, which again very much operates at intersections here, and to invite all of you for future collaborations as we plan to provide capacity building programs to collectively work on these recommendations, especially since we, the Center for Migration, Gender and Justice, are already a signatory to the Women, Peace and Security Humanitarian Action Compact. And since our Gender Justice Beyond Borders Youth Leadership Program was recently selected as a featured youth-led solution for education by the United Nations. So please don't hesitate to reach out, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura, and for highlighting the synergies between the Women, Peace and Security and Youth, Peace and Security agenda. And if I were to frame your main message to our audience here today in relevance to the Youth, Peace and Security agenda, I would say that you're urging for us to be as gender responsive, inclusive, and intersectional in our approaches to effective implementation of the Youth, Peace and Security agenda. And the Generation Equality Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action is a great opportunity for stakeholders from all different walks of life to come together. And we have one youth organization on the board, as well as GNWP, which is on the board. And we are working to integrate youth, peace and security and a youth lens and implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and bring those synergies together instead of silos. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Khaled Aman from the Middle East and North Africa Coalition for Youth, Peace and Security. Khaled, over to you.
Thank you so much, Malika. Thank you everyone for the invitation. It's a great feeling to be with more than 120 peace builders and organizations for this moment of launching the civil society working group on youth, peace and security. I hope next year and the next years we remember this moment when we have a great achievements in this field. Thank you again. I'm happy to be with you all today. Let me share my screen. Just 1 second. Okay. I hope you can see my screen. So yeah, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from wherever you are. My name is Khaled Imam. I'm a human rights lawyer, and I work for the organization Justice Call, which is youth-led organization working on strengthening civic space and human rights in Middle East. We also part of the MENA Coalition for Youth, Peace and Security, which is Malika mentioned, which is a regional platform for youth-led organization in the region to come together and exchange views, experience, resources around the YPS agenda and the MENA region. In the MENA region, it's very clear for all of us that this is the most affected region by the conflict worldwide. If we look for Syria, whereas around 500,000 people killed in this conflict in the last 10 years. In Yemen, where is 100,000 of people, of civilians, most of them are youth and women and children killed in this conflict. Libya, same example, Iraq, unfortunately. So it's very clear that this region is really affected by conflicts, and also the most region needs the efforts of youth to make sure that we are building peace and going on the right direction. So in this region, youth-led organization, human rights defenders, young peace builders, playing very, very important role to build peace, promote the culture of human rights, preventing conflict in this region. And as I described, giving this very hard situation. So the work of youth on spreading this culture of peace and human rights is very essential and important. And I'm just gonna share a few examples, very, very little examples from about what is youth doing exactly to achieve the youth peace and security agenda and strengthening the human rights in the region. If we look in Yemen, we have the Youth Without Borders organization making very good efforts on communicate the voices of youth to the decision making and decision makers in Taz, Yemen, and make sure that all the voices of young people are heard in this local peace building processes. And in Iraq, we have the Peace and Freedom Organization. I think they are with us today here. They are working to localize the YPS agenda by creating a national network of young peace builders that and those people make sure that those people are aware and well trained on the implementation of the YPS agenda and its main resolution 2250. And in Syria, Youth for Change organization also working to build young people capacity in YPS agenda and atrocity crime prevention in this very, very difficult context in Syria. And in the region also we have the MENA coalition. While there is a lot of struggles from the lack of resources, the YPS coalition succeed to create a platform for dialogue, sharing experience, and collective action for youth peace building organization in this region. The challenges. There is a lot of challenges, also building on what as my colleagues mentioned now about lack of partnerships and lack of resources. I will just focus in two main challenges. In my opinion, I think they are really preventing the efforts of implementing this agenda in the region. And unfortunately, we cannot move forward with this agenda without really countering these challenges. First challenge and main challenge is a shrinking of civic spaces. Civic spaces it's very essential and important for working in this agenda. And unfortunately, civil society organization and in particular those led by youth facing a huge challenge, which is the limitation of civic spaces. The civil society and civic spaces targeted by both governments and authorities and also armed groups in most of these conflict areas that I mentioned before. And unfortunately, this is again really limiting the implementation and progresses of the YPS agenda. And when I say civic spaces, I mean really the lack of public spaces that are available for those organizations to work together on the implementation of YPS agenda and strengthen human rights, which is including the safe public spaces, private spaces for young people, digital spaces, including now we all aware about all this surveillance and cyber attacks that facing human rights defenders and civil society organization leaders in this region. Second challenge, and I think also.
Sorry to interrupt, but your slides aren't moving. I don't know if you forgot to change them.
Are not moving? Oh.
No. Yes, Khaled, could you try on screen sharing and then re-screen sharing so that we can see them? Because when you do it before going into presentation mode, sometimes it doesn't follow for us.
I will try it again, but I can see that it's moving here. Okay. Not sure where is the issue.
Perfect. Thank you.
Works now?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, so it's talking about the issue of civic spaces, and now I want to talk about also the limited access to funds and resources that are available for young peace builders and civil society organization in the region, administration processes, legal and security challenges, as well, not just legal, also bureaucracy, when civil society organization need to get like tons of permissions to just get a small amount of money to do their activity. Also, in addition to the complicated requirements of donors, this is really limiting the access to fund and financial resources for youth-led organization, young peace builders in this region. I think this also was mentioned by Victor. And when we talk about, can you see my screen now moving or not yet? Okay, great. And we are talking about really what is our priorities in this region. I will just mention two, and both of them also go back again to the challenges that I spoke about. First, protection. We need protection to ensure that young peace builders and civil society organization can come together, act collectively on the issues that matter to them, engage with decision makers and stakeholders to achieve peace and strengthen the human rights. And second priority for us is financing. We need to make sure that also these young peace builders and youth-led organization have the necessarily financial support to do their work and to achieve their activities on building peace and strengthening human rights in the region. I will stop here and thank you so much again for giving me this opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Khaled. And I think those are two very important priorities for us to take note of: protection and financing. And without those, we cannot invest in young people's meaningful participation and leadership in peace building. Now we're going to travel to Asia. So I have the honor of inviting Linrose Jane Hennen, who is a member of the Young Women Plus Leaders for Peace from the Philippines, which is a program of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. Linrose, over to you.
Thank you so much, Malika, and hi everyone. Thank you for the space. I'm happy to join my fellow peace builders here in this discussion. And some of the points that I will be raising are also points that has been raised by my fellow speakers, panelists in this conversation. But it is my pleasure to represent a network of young women and male allies from the Philippines in this conversation. So the first question as a calling question of this discourse is progress. And I think like how Victor started his intervention, I'll start with the National Action Plan on YPS in the Philippines, which will serve as the nation's blueprint to ensure protection and security of young people, as well as, like increasing participation in the decision-making process and peace building work. And the NAP YPS is very, very promising because it will outline the country's YPS agenda based on the recommendations from youth peace tables, which serves as a platform for young peace advocates to further strengthen their capacities in building a culture of peace and conflict sensitivity, and also mobilize a youth constituency to support the peace processes, the different peace processes in the country. And our network, and also through the Institute of Peace and Development Office in the university that I'm currently affiliated, we were invited in a couple of online consultations for the creation of the NAP YPS. And I think I'd like to mention that as considered as one of the progress when it comes to YPS advocacy in the country. But the creation, I would also like to highlight, but the creation of the National Action Plan is just one of the pathways in localizing and institutionalization of YPS. Even before the creation of NAP YPS, our network has been engaged in empowering local communities and in making sure enhancing ownership of YPS in the local communities. And I think, also what we learn in our work is I think we need to look into existing windows of engagement where we have opportunities of mainstreaming youth peace and security agenda. And to just cite a few examples, so what we do in our network is we integrate YPS agenda in our individual works. I work in the academe, for example, And in our university, we have a peace education course. So we integrate the YPS in our peace education course. Also, but we also like to acknowledge that not all universities and not all schools in the Philippines has the peace education course. So that means that raising awareness on YPS in different, especially non-formal contexts, is equally important. Another example is another member of our network who is a community formator in a big university in the Philippines, also brought his students in our network as interns and connecting, as a practical application of one of their subjects. So the students worked with us in some of our community dialogues, one of which was cited by the UN Secretary General in one of his report in Progress of the YPS Agenda. So, and this experience allows students to be educated about youth peace, not just youth peace and security agenda, but its intersection with WPS as well. We also have members who are elected local officials in the Youth Council, which gives us an opportunity to integrate YPS and WPS in their youth programs. So this opens an opportunity to work with established structures such as the Youth Council for the inclusion of YPS in their youth development plan with allocated resources. And Khalid mentioned that's one of the roadblocks, it's one of the challenges, especially networks, informal networks, working with meager resources. And so this approach, I would say, in our experience, ensures that YPS is localized, it's practical, and it's sustainable. Through these partnerships, we can continue to advocate for raising awareness and ownership of YPS agenda in the local communities. And Victor highlighted that the work happens in the local, in the grassroots level, not in the hotels where they do usually the consultation. So in our network, we do this through our community youth discussions. And with COVID, we shifted online, and we still take opportunities if we can go in communities. And our campaigns. So here, those are one of, I'm just trying to say that when it comes to progress, yes, in the institutionalization, there is an ongoing progress in YPS, but also even before that, there are a lot of grassroots works already in localizing youth peace and security. And also finding, I think the second speaker also mentioned this, the synergy of youth peace and security and WPS agenda also is one opportunity in amplifying messaging of youth peace and security agenda, and bridging these two agenda would address the gap in participation of young women in peace building and work cohesively to address the violence and discrimination faced by young women and girls globally. And that has been, it highlights also the importance of the engagement of not just women, but of men and boys through the inclusion of young men in peace building. And that's why in our network, we have a plus sign, and that indicates, men allies, male allies, I mean, in the advocacy. So with a joint approach between decision makers, women, and young people, we can strengthen our efforts towards achieving sustainable peace. So because WPS and YPS complement each other, and we can learn from the experience of WPS in advancing youth peace and security agenda. So, but what are the challenges? So those are the progress. First, I think, is that there is still existing marginalization of youth despite all these efforts. And young people are marginalized from political and peace processes and largely excluded from political seats. And very timely to mention because the Philippines will be having its national elections next year. And still in the 2022 polls, you can say that political dynasties are still dominating the 2022 elections. And we all know that proximity of young people in decision-making tables really, really matter. And also, young people in the Philippines are active in informal forms of political participation, maybe street activism, volunteerism, social media campaigns. And we also have opportunities to engage in formal political participation. However, youth meaningful participation in formal governance structure has remained low or weak. And one reason is the lack of civic education for youth to prepare them for effective participation in these platforms. And also, in highly patriarchal communities, stereotypes around gender and age can cause young women leaders to be excluded, and their contributions become untapped or invisible. And also, as mentioned repeatedly in the past interventions, the shrinking civic space for youth to participate and online threats. And in the Philippines, young people are also vulnerable to wrongful red tagging in the country. And also it decreases the space where young people can safely participate. And in the country also, troll farms are also used to drown out dissenting voices, accusing them of spreading fake news or being enemies of the people, a sort of censorship through noise. So what are the priorities given these challenges? First is education. Invest in empowering and educating young people and give more opportunities to scale up youth-led initiatives in promoting YPS. And to do this, it has been mentioned that there should be accessible, relevant, dedicated and agile funding and resources that overcome challenges with legal registration, as mentioned by Khalid earlier. And also informal network needs sustained mentorship as well. Second is address the digital divide as we move our initiatives in online spaces. And also it was mentioned that in the consultation of the creation of the National Action Plan on YPS, there are a decreasing number of young people participating in the consultations. And one reason could be the platform where consultations are held. And also that access to ICT is also gendered. Both women and girls are put in place of danger, trying to find internet connection, and they become more susceptible to sexual violence, especially for young girls. We also need to enhance protection of young activists, both online and offline. In our home country, young people organizing and addressing lack of response and inefficiency of the government are being harassed both online and offline. So we need strong mechanisms of human rights protections for young peace builders. And fourth is we need to address also inequality, political inequality, and how it disproportionately affects young people, especially young women. And we need to put more diverse young people in leadership roles, especially in peace processes. And I think last point, priority is capacity building program, maybe in addition to my first point, for young people in monitoring the progress and implementation of youth peace and security agenda is very, very important. Given in ways, maybe learning from how women, peace and security do the monitoring. Also, I think, advocates of youth, peace and security, especially in the context of the Philippines, can learn a lot from that on how we should track developments on YPS agenda. So I think those are my interventions for this conversation in the context of the Philippines, and I'll hand the mic back to Malika. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lynrose. You brought up some really good points, especially on addressing the digital divide and political inequalities and ensuring diverse participation of young people from all backgrounds. It's really, really important, and I hope everyone took note. Now we're going to pass the floor on to Alexandra Bohemir from the Canadian Coalition for Youth, Peace and Security.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much, Malika and Alishka. I'm very excited to be here with all of you. Again, my name is Alexandria Bohemir, and I am located in Ottawa, Canada, and I'm a co-founder of the Canadian Coalition for Youth, Peace and Security. I am currently doing my Master's of Arts in Development Studies and Diplomacy at the University for Peace. And my focus is in peace and security as a domestic issue within Canada, as well as the inclusion of the LGBTQ+ community in peace and security work. And before I begin, I must say that I am very glad to see that Ambassador O'Neill and the Canadian delegation is here today. The Canadian Coalition for Youth, Peace and Security and myself as a Canadian youth peace builder are very grateful for the consistent support that we have from all of you. Beginning with the launch of our coalition. So thank you very much. I think that we've seen a lot of progress made in youth peace and security work globally in the last few years. And I think that while the ongoing pandemic has brought many additional challenges, it's also connected us in new ways and has brought together youth peace builders from around the world closer together. And it's really allowed us to gain better understandings of each other's struggles and strengths, and form better partnerships on our path to making a better tomorrow. And that's a really exciting thing to see. With that being said, a group of us noticed a gap of engagement here in Canada. Because of this, 10 young peace builders, myself included, came together in August of 2020 and launched the Canadian Coalition for Youth, Peace and Security, which I'll be referring to by our acronym, the CCYPS. The CCYPS mandate is twofold. First, we work to bring youth peace and security here home in Canada by engaging in domestic issues of peace and security and social justice. And second, we work to ensure that young people's roles in peace and security are recognized, respected, amplified, including in international processes and policy spaces. One of the approaches that we've taken to help further progress in YPS is to provide education and training to youth and youth-led organizations to help them fully and meaningfully engage in the agenda. This is done mostly through our What is YPS 101 training session, which we developed as a team. We also have held online series talking about how the YPS agenda relates to the work youth and youth organizations are already doing. As an example, the CCYPS did a series linking the Sustainable Development Goals and the Youth Peace and Security Agenda and how they can be approached simultaneously. Additionally, we held a series providing recommendations on how we can better integrate the LGBTQ+ community into the 5 YPS pillars. This was really an important series for me personally as a queer peace builder because far too often in many of these contexts, the LGBTQ+ community is not meaningfully engaged and included in YPS unless it's being led directly by a member of the community, or the acronym might be added as kind of an afterthought, but then isn't actually really expanded on. As we know, the peace and security agenda covers such a large variety of issues, including what I've mentioned, and climate action, sexual reproductive health rights, and in our work going forward, we really want to make sure that all of these issues are covered and addressed. At the end of November, the CCYPS held a preparatory event for the upcoming high-level global conference on youth-inclusive peace processes, which is taking place in January of 2022. We're very excited for all the engagement that's taking place in the lead up to that. And during this forum, Youth Peace Builders co-wrote a public declaration on our expectations for Canada's engagement in YPS going forward. It allowed us to discuss issues of negative versus positive peace and the peace and security issues that we actively experience here in Canada, even though, as I'm sure many of you also feel, a lot of the times people don't always realize that Canada does have a lot of internal peace and security issues. This declaration is going to be shared in the new year. We've also worked to address the tokenization of young people within these spaces. This past summer, we launched our More Than Token survey, which asked youth peace builders from Canada, as well as our international partners, about the tokenization that they experience in civil spaces. We then launched 2 follow-up surveys to help identify solutions to the main problems and barriers that the youth peace builders raised throughout the surveys. The results of these are going to be used to create a toolkit that's going to be shared on how decision makers can avoid tokenizing youth, especially in spaces such as this one. In terms of the questions of what challenges we're facing for meaningful participation and leadership in peace processes, we have found that one of the main challenges is the tokenization of young people. Tokenization in the context of our work and our research, if you haven't heard the term before, is understood to be an act or a series of acts to provide a platform of false political influence to an individual of a specific group, sometimes intended or perceived as representation. Through the survey I mentioned, we were able to hear from such a diverse group of young peace builders, and most participants did not find that young people's knowledge and expertise were valued and taken seriously in decision-making, policy development, and in influencing outcomes. The survey showed us that young people do not feel heard by decision makers or seen as equal actors. Another key takeaway was that many young people experience lack of sustainable funding opportunities, and many are only able to engage in youth peace and security as a volunteer or as an unpaid intern. Additionally, many young peace builders feel like we are treated as a homogenous group, and far too often, only one young person is invited to speak on these issues or only asked to speak specifically about being youth, as if we don't possibly have the knowledge or expertise on such a large variety of issues that fall under the peace and security agenda. So I must say it's really exciting to see so many youth organizers and people speaking here today who are youth. That's really exciting because far too often that's just unfortunately not the case. And a conversation I personally think is very important in YPS is the way young peace builders are viewed. I think we've seen so many approaches where youth peace builders are either seen as a perpetrator of violence or a victim of violence. And I, like many of us here today, am neither of those. While I'm extremely fortunate to currently be pursuing my master's degree, that is not a requirement for me to engage in youth peace and security. The degrees I hold and the age that I currently am should not impact if my voice, my opinions, and my needs are heard and genuinely listened to and taken seriously in peace and security work. We young peace builders are innovative, knowledgeable, and we want to create sustainable peace so that our generation and the generations after us have a chance at living in a safe, just, and peaceful world. But right now, our energy is divided between doing this work as well as fighting and going against all of these barriers that exist that are preventing us from doing it. Many young people are already working on the implementation of the youth peace and security agenda without always realizing that their work is part of it. And far too often, conversations surrounding the YPS resolutions take place behind closed doors without full youth representation and meaningful engagement, lacking the recognition that youth is not a homogeneous group. Coalitions such as the CCYPS are working to provide education and training to youth and youth-led organizations to ensure that they can fully and meaningfully engage in the implementation of these important resolutions at all levels, including with the Security Council and UN member states. Engagement needs to be non-tokenistic, ensure full representation of all impacted groups of young people. We are such a powerful resource, and the voices, ideas, and recommendations of youth peace builders must be heard and taken seriously, and our expertise needs to be recognized. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alexandria, for that very, very powerful call to action and for emphasizing the need for the transformation in the peace building space, from seeing young people as problems to solve and instead as partners for peace, and investing in our capacities and our capabilities. We talk a lot about capacity building, but there needs to be the recognition that we already have these capacities and knowledge and just need to learn how to engage in global policy making. So with that, I'll turn it over to our last speaker, Jorge Valderrabano, who is the regional coordinator for America from United Network of Young Peace Builders. Jorge, over to you.
Hello, thank you very much, Malika. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I have a brief presentation, so I'm gonna share my screen to show you the slides. I hope you can see it here. Okay, so, well, thanks. Yeah, my name is Jorge. I am from Mexico City. I am currently living in New York City. I am studying a graduate program in political economy at New York University. I know that there will be other participations of NYU students, so we should strategize to see how we can align objectives and collaborate towards this goal, and maybe, yeah, implement some of the activities that have been mentioned here. How can we incorporate the YPS agenda in the peace education or research courses we have. So yeah, it's wonderful to be able to be here. I am the executive director, founding member of an organization in Mexico named Agora Mexico. We've been promoting civic and political engagement among young people. And as Malika mentioned, I am also the regional coordinator for America at the United Network of Young Peace Builders. So, well, just a brief explanation of what Agora is, or our activities. We've been delivering workshops, conferences, having dialogues with young people on mainly the prevention of violences, direct or structural, trying to understand necessities, but most importantly, pushing actions that can improve the environments of young people and support young people to turn their immediate circles into more respectful and peaceful communities. Our activities also include assessing projects of other young people who want to make a difference. And we've been creating alliances with local and national media and other actors to increase opportunities for young people to participate yeah, in media channels to express their interests, but also in community projects to improve yeah, their immediate circles, and of course in policy and decision-making spaces such as UN forums and other regional and national spaces. So, well, I just like to make these questions to have a collective reflection on why do young people need to be involved in peace building processes? And I like to start explaining the importance of the young people's approach, which is an approach that has suggested or demanded that projects and policies should be issued and implemented by young people. It is a trend that recognizes the historical imbalances that we have lived, but most importantly, that repairs the results of those historical imbalances and inequalities that have been mentioned during this session also. And it does so in an inclusive and in an accessible way. So this is mainly a tool that can be used in order to assure that young people are involved in decision-making and in peace-building processes. And to answer this question, well, I have some figures from Mexico. Mexico, we understand young people as those under 30 years of age. Mexican youth is made up of 37 million people who represent 31% of the total population. And of this group, 27 million receive an income below the economic well-being line. 5 million are unable to exercise their right to education or to employment. And almost 4 million live in poverty nowadays. So yeah, the inequality gaps faced by young people are exacerbated when it comes to women. For example, only 45% of economically active young women earn an income. The fertility rate between 15 and 19 years is 77 per thousand, which is the highest of the countries belonging to the OECD. And on the other hand, we have young men that have been more affected by the exacerbation of violence that has occurred in recent years in our country and in our region in Latin America. According to data from the Network of Children's Rights in Mexico, REDIM, which is a very known network, between 35,000 and 45,000 minors are currently forcibly recruited by organized crime, and around 205,000 are at risk of being recruited by some type of organized crime due to their social characteristics and the absence of the state and the conflicting situation in our country. So this is the scenario where we are standing right now. And the good thing is that we have mechanisms, tools, laws that have been useful to highlight the importance of including young people in political spaces, in the public life, and in decision-making. Of course, the resolution 2250, 2419, even the 2535, which notes the centrality of young people to the sustainable development goals and the peace agenda. Yeah, this highlights the need not to issue policies and procedures that may increase the participation of young people in peace and in security processes. And now I'm going to speak a bit about specific actions and projects that have been carried out by different stakeholders. We are part of the United Network of Young Peace Builders that, of course, have had a central role promoting this topic. The UNOY has conducted in the region, in Latin America, protection training programs. It has provided security and protection protocols and other tools for young human rights peace builders. This is a material that has been issued by the young people's local authorities in Mexico. It is a handbook that explains how we can incorporate the young people's approach in public policies. I like to highlight this activity because I believe that it is very innovative. I think that we don't have a similar exercise in other countries, but it is a very handy material and document that may allow young people to continue demanding rights and young people's approach in public policies. But most importantly, it provides a guideline or a route for policymakers to incorporate this approach in their activities. Regarding the projects that we've implemented in Mexico, well, we have a Municipal Youth Council, which is a group of young people that we were able to build or to organize in collaboration with local municipal authorities. And it is a group of people that is implementing projects, attending the needs of young people, but also giving their advice and their opinion on how to implement public programs with a young people's approach. We have also had advocacy efforts to visibilize the necessities, the activities that young people have been implementing in the region. This is a side event that we organized during the Youth Forum this year, and it was carried out with the Foreign Ministry of Mexico in partnership, in collaboration with them, and it is an opportunity to create dialogues between authorities and young people, but also what we've been mentioning on intergenerational dialogues. We also have, or we are part of a group that is named Jóvenes Construyendo Paz, Young People Building Peace. This is a group of organizations and young leaders that have been promoting these topics in Mexico mainly. And we have one meeting monthly, but we've now materialized these efforts into a newsletter, a bulletin that is showing the activities that we've been carrying out, but also inviting young people to join these activities and to incorporate tools and materials to their own activities.
Jorge, your time is up now, so would you mind wrapping up your presentation?
For sure, thank you. So, well, in Mexico, we have advanced in laws and public programs. We recently modified the Constitution in order to recognize young people as subjects of rights instead of subject of protection. And that opens up the possibility to issue a general law on the rights of young people that may specify our right to peace and our right to be included in conflict resolution. And we've had other public programs such as Sembrando Vida, which means seeding life, which is a program directed to rural or young people in rural communities to provide economic support and opportunities. And another project or public program that is named Young People Building the Future is providing scholarships and opportunities for people to join companies and join the economic activities. Yeah, now wrapping up. So the next steps in order to continue promoting the YPS agenda and to accelerate the implementation of this agenda would be to strengthen young people, no? And that means giving tools and providing materials for advocacy, for innovations, for accountability, for institutional development. We have priorities in the region, such as building networks, drafting action plans, assuring resources, no? And how do we face the challenges that we may encounter as young people? Well, this is how we can do it: delivering tools, no? Or collectively creating tools for the diagnosis, for drafting action plans, for building alliances, for finding resources. And an important factor in this would be to channel international cooperation and assuring that it has a focus in development instead of in security or in protection, and that is promoting innovation and strengthening processes among young people. And yes, has been mentioned, investing in young people to increase their possibilities for social change, and well, facilitating these types of dialogues and spaces that the civil society working group on YPS is building. I feel very honored to be able to speak today in this session, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jorge. And I have to say, it's such an incredible space to be in and to hear from such inspiring activists like yourselves. I just want to do, I'm going to take a quick attempt at summarizing some of the progress, challenges, and priorities that were outlined through these presentations. First, in terms of progress, we've seen the development of some national action plans on youth, peace, and security, as well as the establishment of coalitions or coordination groups. And then, of course, the boundless youth activism and the incredible achievements of grassroots youth peace builders that really have pushed this agenda forward. And some of the speakers mentioned promoting synergies between the youth peace and security and women peace and security agendas, such as the establishment of the Generation Equality Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action, as well as the overall success in raising awareness about the youth peace and security agenda amongst existing structures. In terms of challenges, we heard about tokenization, the lack of recognition from government, which leads to ongoing marginalization, structural inequalities, including unemployment and patriarchal norms, shrinking civic spaces and censorship, especially on social media, and attacks on youth peace builders, and of course, limited access to funds and resources. And in terms of priorities, we heard about the need for protection for youth peace builders, activists, and human rights defenders so that they can engage in safe, enabling, and inclusive spaces for their participation in decision-making on peace and security. We also heard about intentional partnerships with young people and the need for gender-responsive implementation of the youth peace and security agenda. We heard the call to localize the youth peace and security agenda and build ownership at the grassroots level, as well as addressing the digital divide and political inequalities and ensuring that we are ensuring diverse participation of young people from all different marginalized groups. And then we also heard that the youth peace and security agenda is intersectional. And so we need to be addressing climate change and sexual health and reproductive rights. So those were some of the priorities that we heard, and it's really these priorities that will shape the implementation of the youth peace and security agenda to be youth-led, particularly at the local level. So now I'd like to open the floor up for interventions from some of the member states that we have here. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and I'll pass the floor over to you. Okay, I see. I see two speakers, but I was hoping to give the floor to member states first. So if any member state would like to speak, we'd love to hear from you first, and then I will open it up to reflections from other participants.
Hello.
Okay. All right. While we're waiting, sure, I will pass the floor over to Victor Garpuli.
Hello. Are you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thanks to all the speakers. And this is my first time attending the meeting, Liberia, a peace building organization that inspire and transform the life of the community. We have been building peace in Liberia, especially where we got training. And also we are with the University of Georgia that providing a civil society training to civil society organization in Africa, of which we will be graduating in December of this year on the 31st. First of all, our organization, we have been building peace in Liberia. Just in the issue, because what we want to do here is that to bring peace in the community, we have to create an environment for understanding. So we engage in nonviolent communication project to address the issue of understanding between the community and the people, to have a respect for one another first before we can engage in those things. Because we realize that women have been abused by domestically at home, and women being abused, and women need security. By providing security, we have to build the understanding between women and other people within the community about the values of women and the values of young people. And by doing that, we went in local community by ourselves. We went in school, we went into the lecture center, where we held events with young people, and we ascertain about the condition they are facing within the various community. And then we found out that there are a lot of intervention need to be made. And then we begin to address the issue. In our community, women actually are marginalized in several areas, in the area of education, political, economic. And you can see a lot of young people that are not schooling. And if you want for the young people to grow, to have an understanding about themselves, about the community, the family itself, they need to be educated, and through the education, they will have a sense of belonging. So we went within the community. And besides that, we have a lot of young people in this country that they are taking jobs as a result of exclusion. And nobody cared to reach out to them. And besides, because of that, we decided to get to the young people and try to talk to them, that they have a space, they have an opportunity for life transformation. And that is what we have been doing in Liberia. And we have been working with other partners abroad as a peace builder within our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that intervention, and it's really important and exactly what we are going to talk about next in terms of promoting synergies between the youth peace and security and women peace and security agendas, which is also key for more inclusive peace building that addresses the multiple layers of discrimination and marginalization and exclusion experienced by young women, LGBTQIA+ persons, and other gender and sexual minorities. Both agendas address the violence of exclusion and emphasize the importance of preventing conflict and prioritizing disarmament through sustainable and inclusive peace building. And the working group will advocate for gender responsive youth peace and security implementation and empower young women and LGBTQ youth from conflict and crisis affected communities to access global policy spaces. So next we are going to have a presentation from student researchers from the NYU Center for Global Affairs, who will present findings from their research they conducted on patterns for youth engagement in peace building processes. The research aims to examine how youth, especially young women, are included in national peace strategies and peace planning initiatives, such as conflict prevention, countering violent extremism, involvement in official decision-making, and humanitarian action, and whether young women's priorities are reflected in national action plans on women, peace, and security. The research will inform the advocacy led by the working group on effective youth-led implementation. So over to you, NYU.
Thank you so much, Malika. I think we are working on getting the presentation up on the screen. Great, thank you so much, Katrina. Hi everyone, my name is Sarah. It's so great to be here with you today. We feel privileged and honored to be in this space with you all and to share with you a portion of our research study in partnership with GNWP. The research we're presenting today was conducted over a period of 3 months by myself and my fellow graduate students at NYU Center for Global Affairs as part of an ongoing collaboration with GNWP. A full report on our research findings is in progress and will be released in the coming months. You'd kindly go to the next slide, please, Katrina. So our research involved investigation of how young people in 6 countries, Tunisia, Nigeria, Philippines, DRC, and Iraq, specifically Iraqi Kurdistan and Jordan, are engaging in official youth peace and security processes. Each of us students were responsible for connecting research in a country. We would have liked to include Finland more concretely in our research as their leaders in implementing the YPS agenda, but unfortunately we were only able to secure 1 interview there. If you can move to the next slide, please. So we carried out our research by interviewing activists in each of the respective countries to explore youth perspectives and especially young women's perspectives on the value and credibility of official processes to engage youth in peace work. Although we were asked to assess which mechanisms and modalities ensure the most effective youth engagement, we weren't able to make that definitive assessment given the lack of data on specifics about youth engagement in various contexts. We also analyzed existing national action plans and other planning documents for further insights into youth participation and perspectives. Our research revealed that youth are willing to be engaged if they feel that they'll be adequately represented, a sentiment that we heard echoed by several of the speakers today. And that representation ultimately means hearing their honest needs and including them in decision-making. So our hope is that our research validates youth concerns by demonstrating where youth and young women feel the most excluded and further highlights opportunities for more effective representation and meaningful participation. Next slide, please, Katrina. So we did encounter some limitations to our research given that the YPS agenda is still relatively new and official mechanisms are evolving. It's difficult to apply a comparative analysis to the 6 contexts as they differ significantly in terms of conflict and the way in which youth are affected by conflict, the nature of their governance systems, and many other factors that affect youth engagement. We also found that there was a lack of accurate data on the number of people participating in YPS consultations, drafting processes and planning, and a lack of gender disaggregation. Further, there's no real clarity on how to measure effective youth engagement. For example, what would constitute effective or even adequate engagement? Would that be number of participants in consultations or diversity of participation or of participants? Further clarity on how to measure the impact of YPS efforts. So would successful efforts culminate in the passage of specific legislation or improvements in youth employment numbers or number of participants in disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration programs? We found that this was quite ambiguous. We do want to note, however, that Finland is completing indicators for their YPS National Action Plan, and this will no doubt help in the future to monitor impacts of YPS efforts. Lastly, we do want to acknowledge that language barriers present a challenge in making a complete assessment, and further that myself and my colleagues are affiliated with NYU, which is a more northern perspective, and this may skew our view. So each of the countries that we looked at chose different approaches to implementing the Security Council Resolution 2250 on YPS. I touched a bit on this in the last slide, but I want to again emphasize that there are significant differences between these countries that can affect youth participation and implementation of the YPS agenda. For example, the existence of armed conflict, levels of democratic freedoms which present various risks for engaging in protests or voicing opposition, the size and strength of civil society, human rights organizations, and of course, massive developmental disparities between these countries. Overall, we did find, though, that youth were eager to speak with us and willing to engage in YPS and peace planning processes in their countries. While we did come across challenges, we found several opportunities for hope and optimism. Notably, there's been progress in transcribing the YPS agenda in the language of the people it targets and making it reachable for people in rural areas. As one of the activists we spoke with, she called this decolonizing the peace, which we found to be extremely powerful. We did find that in some areas, youth peace building training has become redundant as youth prefer opportunities to participate and not more trainings and conferences on peace building, as local activists often understand the context of conflict and peace building. I mentioned this when discussing the limitations we encountered, but again, the need for data and indicators to assess the effectiveness of youth engagement in YPS processes, that was a big finding for us as well. In terms of youth priorities, we found that the major concerns expressed by youth are the lack of employment opportunities and corruption, which confirms the progress study on YPS titled The Missing Piece. We also heard from youth that they feel that there's risks to participation and the expression of oppositional views, and that youth are somewhat jaded about official YPS engagement efforts. Further, we discovered that the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated exclusions, particularly those related to digital disconnects and urban-rural biases. But in particular, we found that young women raise issues that are gender specific, such as security risks associated with participation and gerontocracy. My colleague Nikki will dive deeper into these themes in the next slides.
Thank you, Sarah. It's so great to be here with you all today. So a lot of these priorities that Sarah was just discussing that were also mentioned by all the amazing activists and speakers today, exploitation, gerontocracy, urban bias, for example, these can be understood in terms of violence of exclusion, which is a concept mentioned frequently in the YPS progress report, as I'm sure everyone is familiar. The youth activists we spoke to really raised these concerns in regards to the YPS planning processes, for instance, in National Action Plan plans and NAP consultations. We found that ironically, some of these experiences mirror the reasons why the YPS agenda actually came about to be in the first place. So problems of tokenistic exclusion, Alexandria, you spoke a lot about that, a sense that they're being courted in order to build support for the government, cynicism because there have been so many failed prior efforts to follow through on promises and meaningfully include youth. Particularly in the Philippines, we saw it was expressed at the same protocols that do not apply to youth organizations, and they feel excluded in that protocols invite government agencies to meetings, but that doesn't exist for youth organizations. Obviously, also COVID has exacerbated some obstacles to effective inclusion, which I'll discuss in the next slide, please. So as we all experience, and we can all understand that we're living right now, COVID-19 has made digital access extremely crucial for youth, which you've all touched on, and therefore for young women's advocacy especially. We found that in all countries, hate speech on social media and the lack of internet or electricity access were disincentives for women, particularly rural women and minorities in YPS processes. As a youth activist from the DRC put it, poverty is preventing connection. We found this to be really encompassing of everything. So peace activists also reported serious Zoom fatigue, so I'm sure we can all relate, that de-incentivizes continued participation and engagement in the advocacy efforts we're looking at. The digital disconnect among urban and rural communities is really important as it has exacerbated urban bias and elitism, which were really big themes we saw throughout the YPS advocacy that we were looking at. If you can move to the next slide. So urban bias and elitism, for example, those are issues that affect all youth, right? But according to youth peace activists that we spoke to, and many of you are here today, the young women raised additional and similar concerns to young men. So employment, corruption, education, as labeled 1, 2, 3 on our slide, those are priorities experienced by all youth. And however, not shockingly, there are differences in priorities for women. So youth activists said that some young women's priorities haven't received the adequate attention in the YPS processes and plans as the first 3 that are experienced by all youth. Those being numbers 4 and 5, sexual harassment and gender-based violence, SBGV, and also the disparagement of young women's leadership capacities and failure to address how their time constraints because of maybe care work at home, for example, affects their participation. So although these are prioritized by young women, we also wanted to emphasize that we did see allyship with men, which is really important. This quote from a Nigerian male youth activist acknowledges the need for gender-based violence to be included in national action plans. So the question here is really, Are YPS mechanisms adequately reflecting and addressing these priorities and recognizing their connection to peace? The answer that we found is that these challenges of including young women in YPS processes remain very strong throughout. We can move to the next slide on mechanisms. So the mechanisms that we observed for engaging young women in YPS are the same as for young men, and women obviously do engage just as much as men. However, the exception, of course, is that often young women are really told that these women-specific concerns that they have, those should be addressed under WPS and not under YPS. And that was a super noticeable pattern that we saw throughout. When women try to go to WPS to address these issues, it's not well received. And under the WPS systems, almost everywhere that we interviewed, there were serious problems of exclusion because of issues of gerontocracy. Within the WPS, we found that senior women had been quite patronizing when youth tried to speak up. This quote from the DRC really clearly illustrates some of these problems. We are told as youth, you have your resolution, so you need to focus on your resolution. We women, we have our resolution. We need their experience, but we are now like enemies, so we're not working together at all. Young women, therefore, are really being siloed into WPS and not YPS, which leaves them without a place to voice their concerns, which is why we labeled this slide falling through the cracks, because we see that young women are really falling through the cracks in both the WPS and YPS. Going along with that, when young women do go to YPS under YPS and government processes, there's really this limited accommodation for young women's concerns and limited meaningful recording of their concerns. We did find that maybe under the youth coalitions, we get the impression that things are better with women's participation, but we want to acknowledge that this wasn't fully consistent and we don't have enough research to fully say this. This does raise really two important questions, which I'll look at in the next slide. So this asks the question, is there meaningful inclusion of women in the YPS NAPs, and how do we define meaningful inclusion? NAPs being the National Action Plans, as everyone knows. Looking at this chart, when looking at to the extent to which the YPS adequately includes women's concerns, we saw that the YPS NAPs show significant variation in the extent to which they're addressed. So now we all know the YPS NAPs are in the early stages. You know, Finland just had ours and we all had theirs and we all saw it, and congrats to Nigeria again in November. And as Victor was saying, I think, you know, Liberia and Gambia are working on theirs. But so once those are more finalized, we'll be able to give a more comprehensive analysis. But obviously at this moment, we can't. And time doesn't permit me to go into the entire chart, but so far we show that Finland shows robust inclusion of young women's concerns, and inclusion is much less substantive in the Nigeria YPS NAP, and also the Amman Declaration, which we included, which is not an official YPS NAP, but we included it because it did seem to be more influential to the activists we spoke to than the Security Council resolution was, which we found really important and to be a great example of other regional efforts focusing on youth. An important note here is the vague parameters of defining youth, which people have mentioned today, but with UN youth beginning at 18 and the rights of girls ending at 18, there's an issue with the overlap, and girls experiencing these YPS issues at, for example, ages 15 and 25, that's a completely different experience. We also want to note that a similar analysis should be done for LGBTQ issues and inclusion, and this is not comprehensive of all genders, but due to limitations, we haven't been able to do that and would love to in the future. If we go to the next slide. In the same sense, we're looking here at if meaningful inclusion of youth in YPS NAPs. In our chart, we find they're surprisingly empty on young women and youth concerns. Often generational issues are reduced to the difference between women and girls with no recognition of gender issues and the risks affecting youth in relation to peace and security. So in trying to get at what meaningful inclusion really means, we want to move away from this reduction of young women into just girls. There's no time for me to go through these cells either, but the quick glance shows that the WPS NAPs don't sufficiently address these categories. Jordan and DRC seem to be outliers as they contain more mentions of young women. They're more recent agreements, but the dominant pattern is to address women and girls and not differentiate for youth. When thinking of these gender issues that aren't addressed, they're not really adequately addressing anything that's non-cis male participation, that being issues of sexual and gender-based violence and threats to LGBT issues, which my colleague Jen will further talk about on the next slide.
Thank you, Nikki. So as we've mentioned, as some of the other peace activists have mentioned previously, young peace activists face security threats in most contexts, particularly when they're critical of governments. And we've seen this in the DRC, Nigeria, and Iraq, where protesters were met with police brutality. For young women, these added risks of sexual harassment and violence exacerbate their ability to participate meaningfully in peace building. LGBTIQ individuals and communities also face these threats. These added gendered risks make participating in peace building activities more challenging and dangerous. As we can see in the middle here with this quote illustrated by an Iraqi peace builder, the biggest problem for young women's priorities is when any female faces harassment. It's not easy for them to declare that. No one is supporting women and this harassment is being hidden. This makes peace building more dangerous. Next slide, please. However, while young women are often advised to look to WPS processes to have these gender-specific concerns addressed, they ran into these issues of gerontocracy in the women's movement. Our interviewees have claimed that young women often find that their voices and the voices of older activists are privileged, giving the sense that young women have to wait their turn before their age-specific issues will be addressed. We see this in these two quotes from Jordan and the DRC, where women who are already in the peace process, they do not take younger women into it. They need to break out of this intergenerational conflict to allow young women to come into their power of being able to make peace in their countries. Next slide. Thank you. During our interviews, we also found these four cross-cutting issues pertaining to LGBTIQ engagement, climate change, SRHR, and migration. These issues were mentioned as being very important to youth and young women. For example, peace activists in Iraq, Tunisia, and the Philippines expressed concerns about safety and acceptance of LGBTIQ community members. And activists in the Philippines specifically said that they hope to raise awareness about this community through education. While climate change and environmental justice was mentioned as a concern for priority of youth, these concerns were not reflected in official processes in the Philippines or in Nigeria. This is actually particularly interesting with the Nigerian YPS NAP because youth prior to these discussions mentioned that climate change was a really important priority for them, and it was not actually reflected in their YPS NAP. Young women in many contexts, including the Philippines, have had early childcare responsibilities, and in some cases, this relates to early motherhood. Questions of managing sexual relations, reproductive, and motherhood deeply impact young women's capacities to engage in peace work. These are not normally considered topics for peace or security planning, so they would be valuable to explore these connections between SRHR and women's involvement in peace. Finally, the migration concerns were raised in the Philippines by multiple interviewees who were concerned about large IDP communities in Mindanao. Both in Tunisia and Iraq, there's a youth immigration problem because youth there do not see any possibility of change or improvement or integration into government systems. Next slide, please. Therefore, future iterations of the YPS agenda can potentially address these concerns if the discussion and implementation are expanded to meaningfully include all diversity of youth and young women. This includes women in rural communities, poor urban communities, Indigenous youth, LGBTQ youth, all of them. Therefore, we need a stronger analysis of the conditions for effective and meaningful youth engagement in YPS processes. This would mean better data on the composition of consultative processes and indicators on impact and outcomes. We also need to have gender, race, ethnicity, and SOGS disaggregated data on patterns of youth inclusion and the explicit accommodation of diversity, such as childcare facilities or security arrangements. In addition, localization of the YPS agenda is vital to its intelligibility and relevance. It must be linked directly to the immediate youth priorities and local processes. This will help combat the elite skew of the YPS work. This relates to urban bias, association with the UN, technical language, literal language barriers, and the digital disconnect by identifying the appropriate forms of communication. As Victor mentioned earlier, local activists already understand the language of conflict. We just need to make it more localized for those individuals. We also must combat the projectization of donor funding in favor of a focus on a more process and sustainability. Therefore, by not reporting on monthly or short term, we need to really focus on the long-term goals of each YPS NAP. We must also do this by supporting expanding the YPS fund and improving communication of innovative YPS work. Fourth, we need to remunerate youth for their engagement in consultation, reflection, and planning. This was mentioned by Alexandria earlier. We must not assume that youth have infinite free time and can dedicate their time without remuneration. Finally, we must create enabling conditions for intersectionality to avoid the homogenization and reduction of youth into an undifferentiated category. Therefore, we must clarify the connections between young women's concerns, such as SRHR, and LGBTQ concerns, such as stigmatization, with peace. We can support the attention to young women and LGBTQ concerns and WPS NAPs, and that can help inform future YPS NAPs. Next slide. So like Victor shared at the beginning, and as an Iraqi activist shared with us during our interviews, youth are willing and able and ready to work with a YPS agenda. Therefore, we believe that these recommendations will help address these challenges to engage with youth and make future iterations of the YPS agenda more effective. We'd like to quickly finish by saying that we are incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be a part of GNWP's work. We want to thank all of the interviewees who took the time out of their incredibly busy schedules to speak with us. We were incredibly honored to be able to amplify your voices. We feel it's important to share that not only did the GNWP staff spend so much time, they went over and above with the amount of help that we asked for. Their conviction and dedication, personally, we find incredibly inspiring. Thank you, GNWP, and thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you so much to all of you for that incredible presentation, and thank you for filling some of the data gaps in what we mean by effective implementation of the youth, peace, and security agenda. And as I said before, the recommendations that came out of this research are going to guide the work and advocacy of the working group on youth, peace, and security. So thank you very much. Before I open the floor up for reflections, I just wanted to clarify that the working group on youth, peace, and security is a civil society space, and we are allies with the global and very closely connected to the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace, and Security. But as we know, that is a multi-stakeholder space, and this one is for youth-led and youth-serving organizations to engage directly in advocacy with the United Nations Security Council. So with that, I'd love to open the floor up for interventions, and I see here that Menon has their hand raised. So Menon, over to you.
Thank you very much. So I would also like to thank all the speakers for their presentation. Young people remain largely excluded from decision-making processes, political institution, and the labor market. They also continue to be victims of stereotypes and discrimination, and those stereotypes are often used as pretext to ignore their demands and to violate their rights. Today's discussion showed that young people could be part of the discussion on major global issues and must be part of it. This is why France fully supports the involvement of youth in the discussions and decisions, which should enable us to address the multiple challenges of today. So we would just like to welcome the launch of this civil society working group on youth, peace, and security. And also I would like to assure you that France will continue to be engaged in ensuring that young people and young women are associated in our work at the United Nations, and including, of course, at the Security Council. Thank you.
Thank you so much for France's partnership and support to youth-led and youth-serving organizations. I'd like to pass the floor over to Nina.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, thanks. I'm really inspired to hear so many impassioned and committed and articulate youth who have made presentations today. And I'm coming from the perspective of having worked on the WPS agenda for the past 2 decades. And I'd like to also commend and salute many of the youth have been instrumental to promoting that agenda over the years. And today I see that many have identified similar challenges that they've encountered, that we've encountered on the WPS agenda, including in implementation of 10 resolutions on WPS. So my question is twofold. for me, and as in an article I wrote last year on the 20th anniversary, the biggest challenge is in the implementation of commitments. Is in implementation of commitments, including in these and the funding for such implementation. And therefore, my question is, since there's another track now of Security Council action on the Youth, Peace, and Security agenda, and you have another track with the W, Peace, and Security agenda, and the overall challenge is implementation. How do you see that we can address the issue of how these two agendas can be mutually reinforcing and not become competing, including in the context of the Security Council? Because already just with the WPS agenda, I've been quite critical that we haven't had sufficient serious implementation action by the council. And I think that youth are essential to the WPS agenda, and I fully support the YPS agenda. But my question is, how do we make them mutually reinforcing and not really excuses to look at one and not the other? Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, for that very important question. And apologies, I think my internet was lagging a little bit. But are you able to hear me now? Is my audio clear? Okay, great. Sorry about that. I think you're absolutely right. And in all of our advocacy, we're promoting synergies, not silos, not just between the women, peace and security and youth, peace and security agendas, but also with humanitarian frameworks where young people and women are currently shut out. So you're absolutely right. And the lack of implementation and ownership and real investment in youth and women-led implementation of both agendas remains the central challenge. So this will be one of the key messages that the Civil Society Working Group on Youth, Peace, and Security promotes. I have time for one last intervention, so I'd like to pass the floor over to the CEO and founder of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, Mavik Cabrera-Beleza. Mavik, over to you.
Thank you, Malika. Can you hear me? Yeah, good evening from Bangladesh. I would like to respond to Nina's question. As I was listening very, very intently from the beginning of this meeting, I was thinking, what can we learn from the women, from our advocacy and our efforts to implement the Women, Peace, and Security agenda effectively? First, we need to keep in mind where these agendas originated. We will not have 1325 and the 9 supporting resolutions on women, peace, and security. We will not have Resolution 2250 and the 2 supporting resolutions on youth, peace, and security, if not for civil society advocacy. We will not have the Compact on Women, Peace, and Security and Humanitarian Action, if not for civil society advocacy. I think that is our starting point. And I don't know how many member states we have. I know that we have a representative from Mexico, and I saw and Ambassador Jacqueline O'Neill was of Canada. Ambassador for Women, Peace, and Security was with us from the start of this meeting. I just know, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see a lot of member states, especially Security Council, in this meeting, and I don't see a lot of UN entities, and that makes me sad. I think they're, missing a lot for not being here. The member states and UN entities, apart from recognizing the origin of these resolutions, they need to realize that it's civil society, it's the young people that we have here, the women peace builders, the women's rights activists are the ones who breathe life into these resolutions. They will not be here anymore. They will be gathering dust on the shelves of government bureaucracies or the UN bureaucracy, if not for efforts of civil society. But to your question, how do we ensure synergy? In the global network of women peace builders close to 50 countries that we work in, we ensure that all of our meetings on the national action plans or all of our efforts in implementation, all of our monitoring and reporting, that young people are there and not there to just watch or not there just to listen, but meaningfully participate, ensuring that their voices are heard. And we also encourage senior women peace activists, women's rights activists to participate in your discussions. And only when we listen intently and we, support each other and actually contribute to the work that is being done, that we can work together. So here in Bangladesh, we ensure that we are together, the women's rights activists and the youth peace builders. We are together in calling on the international humanitarian organizations, the intersectoral coordinating group, that we are working together. We have distinct issues, but we are working together to ensure that the design and implementation of the National Action Plan and the humanitarian response reflect our voices and our contributions to the decision making. Thank you. Over to you, Marika.
Thank you, Mavic. And it's intersectional and intergenerational feminist solidarity that you channel, and we all aspire to have that within the broader WPS and YPS communities. I know I said you were the last intervention, but I'd like to pass the floor over to Stefan from Canada. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Malika. And just in the context of time, I'll go really quickly. But I just wanted to say that Canada has been listening quite carefully to today's presentation. We had Ambassador O'Neill, who's our Women, Peace and Security Ambassador, present. And simply to say that, Canada has been quite leader in this space and is really welcoming the launch, and really happy that all of this work is happening. We're following this closely, and you can absolutely count on our support. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And with that, I'm sorry, but we have to close our discussion for today. And I just want to, before I pass it over to Alicia for the closing remarks, I just want to say that the progress made in the implementation of the Youth Peace and Security Agenda has to be credited to grassroots youth peace builders who are leading critical work on the ground to translate the resolutions into necessary action. And you can bet that the Civil Society Working Group on Youth Peace and Security will do everything in its power to create a platform for sustained dialogue and communication between these grassroots youth peace builders and the United Nations Security Council. So just watch our progress, and we hope to stay in touch with all of you. With that, I'll pass it over to Alicia to close us out.
Thank you so much, Malika. I'll be very brief. I'm very respectful of your time. Thank you so much to everyone who participated, who stayed for the entire duration of this launch. Apologies to those who haven't had the opportunity to participate. Unfortunately, there's always some limitations of time. What I would like to emphasize is that we are by no means trying to portray the idea that YPS implementation can happen without intergenerational partnerships. And this is also why we formed the Civil Society Working Group on Youth Peace and Security, because we do realize that YPS implementation cannot happen without the engagement on non-youth stakeholders. And we believe that opportunities such as this event, but also hopefully future events where we can have much in-depth exchanges between civil society and member state representatives can build this trust in institutions, and also that member states can hear the recommendations that young people have that are indeed based either on research that is being carried out by youth and non-youth actors, as well as their lived experiences, which are no less valuable. I know that a lot of people have said that a lot of money is going into conferences that are not meaningful and that don't lead anywhere, but I would still like to encourage the remaining member state representatives, as well as the young peace builders in this room, that there will be this high-level global conference on youth inclusive peace processes, where I will see many of you, you know, as one of the co-organizers, and we hope to have many more of these discussions about crucial topics within the YPS agenda with you there. So again, you know, huge thank you for everyone who joined today, who spoke your mind, especially to the young peace builders who were, I think, very much to the point and who made the remarks that really affect them. And yeah, thank you everyone. And we look forward to having more of these exchanges in the future. And thank you, Malika, for the expert moderation, as someone put it in the chat. Have a good afternoon, evening, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for the event. It's nice sharing my thoughts and listening to the thoughts of everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so beautiful.
I think my voice should also be heard there. Thank you guys. Thank you.